Today we're going to look at the story of Bathsheba, round 2. Last time we looked at the beginning of her story, the sad moment of David's life where he is not doing what he's supposed to do, and it turns into a huge disaster for him and for Israel, really. And here we're looking at the tail end of Bathsheba's life. And actually she exhibits some characteristics that I think specifically qualify her to be among the list of people that make it into Jesus's genealogy. So we're looking at the bigger picture is Matthew chapter 1 and the genealogy that leads us to Jesus. Why is Bathsheba one of the women mentioned there? And this story maybe shines a new light onto that. So let's dive in to the story of Kings and the end of Bathsheba's story. 1 Kings 1:11 through 31. Nathan said to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, "Did you hear that Adonijah, Haggith's son, has become king, but our master David doesn't know about it? Let me give you some advice on how you and your son Solomon can survive this. Go to King David and say, 'Didn't my master the king swear to your servant, your son Solomon will certainly rule after me? He will sit on my throne. Why then has Adonijah become king? While you are speaking there with the king, I'll come along and support your words.' So Bathsheba went to the king in his bedroom. The king was very old, and Abishag from Shunem was serving the king. Bathsheba bowed down on her face before the king. The king asked, 'What do you want?' She said to him, 'Your Majesty, you swore by the Lord your God to your servant, your son Solomon will certainly rule after me. He will sit on my throne. But now look, Adonijah has become king, and my master the king doesn't know about it. He has prepared large quantities of oxen, fattened cattle, and lamb. He's invited all the royal princes as well as Abiathar the priest and Joab the general. However, he didn't invite your servant Solomon. As for you, my master the king, the eyes of all Israel are upon you to tell them who will follow you on the throne of my master the king. When my master the king lies down with his ancestors, then I and my son Solomon will become outlaws.' While she was still speaking with the king, the prophet Nathan arrived. The king was informed, 'The prophet Nathan is here.' Then Nathan came in before the king and bowed his face to the ground. He said, 'My master the king, you must have said Adonijah will become my king after me and will sit on my throne. Indeed, today he went down and prepared oxen, fattened calf, and lamb in large numbers. He invited all the royal princes and generals, and Abiathar the priest. They are eating and drinking with him.' And they said, 'Long live King Adonijah. Adonijah didn't invite me, your servant, Zadok the priest, Jehoiada's son Benaiah, or your servant Solomon. If this message was from my master the king, you didn't make it known to your servant. Who should follow you on the throne of my master the king?' King David answered, 'Bring me Bathsheba.' She came and stood before the king. The king made a solemn pledge and said, 'As surely as the Lord lives, who rescued me from every trouble, regarding what I swore to you by the Lord, Israel's God, your son Solomon will certainly succeed me. He will sit on the throne after me. I'll see that it happens today.' Bathsheba bowed down with her face to the ground. She honored the king and said, 'May my master the king, may my master King David live forever.'" So now we're going to the end of the Bathsheba story, where at the beginning she was being used and objectified, and David had his own tree of life moment and he failed the test. And yet this woman who's likely of Gentile origin, who's the most unlikely candidate to be a part of the line of kings, God is grafting into this story, and she becomes the mother of King Solomon, the next great king of Israel. And ultimately, she's the mother of the son of David and the line of kings that will lead us all the way to Jesus. We've been asking this question, kind of why, interrogating why are these women in particular. We've looked now at Tamar and Rahab and Ruth and now Bathsheba. What is she doing in the genealogy in Matthew chapter 1? So some of the same themes keep coming up. She's Gentile, she's oppressed, she's not the one that you would have expected. And here I think is another theme that really stuck out to me, because she's doing things that the other women in the story that we've looked at for the last several weeks have been doing. And so Bathsheba here is persistent toward like maintaining her name and her family in the line of Israel. And so that kind of tenacity and fortitude and persistence, we've seen this theme over and over and over again. Tamar did it. She kind of fought for her and her sons to be a part of the lineage of Israel. Rahab fought to have her family grafted into the people of Israel. Ruth fought to have her identity be one of Israel's, to say, your people are my people, your God is my God. And here Bathsheba is doing the same thing. Bathsheba, along with the prophet Nathan, there's politics going on. David's old, he's about to die, and one of his sons decides, I'm going to take the throne. Well, Solomon, Bathsheba's son, has already been given this promise by David, and they're kind of rehashing that here. And so rather than just, turn over and walk away and allow it to happen, Bathsheba fights for her and her son to be a part of the continuing story of Israel. And so this story here, I feel like that's maybe at least one clue as to why would Matthew, so many years later, make sure that her story is a part of Jesus' story. And this is maybe a great candidate for that. The whole thing is great. Her whole story, especially going back to the way that David's fall and his sinfulness, it's like we're not brushing that away. Matthew doesn't try to gloss over that story. He's actually telling us a genealogy that leads us to the Christ in a way that highlights the brokenness of Israel. But here also we have this woman with this tenacity and persistence to say, Your Majesty, you swore that your son Solomon would certainly rule after you, but look, Adonijah is taking his place. What are you going to do about it? And so she's fighting for Solomon. And there's something about that faithfulness, that fortitude, that persistence that I think God honors. And so there's this sense here. The other thing I'll add on that is it's what I find interesting if you're going back to Matthew in particular. If you read through the Matthew 1 genealogy, she's the only person who doesn't get named explicitly. So Tamar gets named, Rahab, Ruth. Here in the genealogy, Matthew says the wife of Uriah. And we might think, here's someone erasing the woman's name from history. But I think it's actually a really specific point Matthew is trying to make. He's highlighting the fact that this was, one, the wife of a Gentile. So there's that whole Gentile connection there as well. But it also is highlighting the fact that this whole thing was messed up from the beginning. This was David not following after God's heart. This was David not doing what he was supposed to do in committing adultery and killing Uriah. And so Matthew is not sugarcoating that. He's writing that whole story into this. So last week we looked at, back in Samuel, the actual story of David committing adultery with Bathsheba. But then here, this is just like a nice bookend of Bathsheba's story, that she is fighting for her place in Israel's story.